The whole point of a risk assessment in any form or fashion is just to protect value, the value of the business, the asset, whatever it is. And that's what we're kind of looking at here. And in the risk assessment process, doesn't matter who you're looking at, they pretty much have the same requirements. You're going to try to identify all of the internal and external threats to data. You're going to categorize those, you're going to score them, give them some type of inherent risk rating before any control is in place. Then you're going to identify the controls you actually have in place to address that risk. So a risk assessment can't be a wish list. It can't be what you want to have in place to reduce that risk. It has to be the actual control you're currently using. And then you score your residual risk, and that will help you determine whether your control is working the way you want it to. Then these identified controls, and we'll have a sheet on the screen in a minute that will kind of lay some of this out from a visual. But that control then becomes your written policy. Whatever you've determined, that's going to save that device. Use your cell phone as an example. All of us have cell phones. All of us have a case on this cell phone. That case is there because we ran a risk assessment on our device. The risk of breaking it, we're going to reduce that risk with a case. So we're going to write that into policy. But at the end of the day, who does risk belong to? Who owns it? It's not IT. It's the stakeholders. It's management. It's your board. It's your senior executives. It's the owner of the company. They own the risk. It's very important that they understand that. I think your senior leaders in IT and management, they understand that, but it's not always understood when it comes to security. You have a million policies on a million different topics, but when you get to some type of security policy, oh, that's an IT function. Well, that's just not true, because they own the risk. They should be a part of the policy making process to reduce that risk. Per NIST 830, which is all about risk assessments, great document, free to download. Go grab it if you haven't gone through it. It makes understanding and kind of working through risk assessments more understandable. It's a long document, but there's some key sections in there that'll help you out. But they will tell you here that you must communicate the risk assessments to the stakeholders to ensure that the decision makers across the industry or across the organization can make appropriate control decisions. That's the ones who are responsible for making the control decisions. Well, I'm going to talk about that again in a minute, but the risk assessment itself, everybody has a different type of risk assessment. I know there's vendors that sell risk assessments. I've seen some I love. I've seen some I couldn't even get to the bottom line of the risk or the control because it was so muddy. Do not overcomplicate the process. As it's stated, you're going to identify your internal and external risk or threats to data or your systems. Have a little inherent score, as we kind of have on the left-hand side of the controls column here. Likelihood, impact, we should be measuring those things. Then the controls column will identify the control that we have in place to reduce that risk. And then on the right-hand side of the control column is where your residual ratings come in. Now on this one, this is actually a screenshot from a client that I worked with. No names on the screen or anything like that, but we had to highlight the control column in yellow because they didn't have proper controls around, doing background checks on their employees. And they were in an industry where you definitely should be doing background checks. But if you're going through NIST 800-171 compliance, it's a requirement that you have that in place. And this organization had to be 800-171 compliant. So they were missing that piece. But other things here, sensitive information not disposed of properly. What does your shredding look like? Are you locking your documents up at night? There's all kind of different things that's going to be captured in this risk assessment document. But ultimately, there's 2 points here. Do not overcomplicate it. And the most important point is that control column is what helps you write your information security policy. If you have a risk listed and a control that says you're reducing that risk, I should be able to trace it to some type of policy. And again, as you can kind of see, this is why it makes this the foundation of your whole information security program. So it's not overly complicated. This one's just an Excel spreadsheet. We work this with a multi-billion-dollar bank, one of the most heavily regulated industries out there. If it works for a multi-billion-dollar bank, it most likely would work for just about any other industry.